Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is the extremely well and up-to-date UberHansen, who has been keeping up with every single free agent transaction that's going on, and I have them all in front of me as part of our show notes. It is extremely helpful. Yeah, folks, it has been a day for the NFL. Free agency, the legal tampering period is now open, which means all the deals that have already been agreed to are now being announced. So it's quite a time. I'm very excited. So many crazy things have happened. Things that I never actually thought were going to happen have happened, and we're here to just sort of catch you all up, break some things down. If you've been following along throughout the day, Steve Mathis from the from the Air Raid Hour was here for like 5 straight hours doing this. Shout out to him. If you saw any of that, if you're just now tuning into this, like, go watch them. He'll be back at 9 with Tilt to do some more. But yeah, shout out to Steve for doing that much coverage for so long. Just a great time. Before we get any further, Uber, how are you on this first day of legal tampering?
Dude, I love Tamper Day. I was thinking about it. It's probably in my top 5 favorite NFL holidays. Man, I can just soak it all in all day long, and I did. Some of the moves were completely inconsequential. Other ones, I'm like, whoa, man, that person got paid, or why the hell did that person get paid? So yeah, not a lot of moves on the Bills front, but we still had our own little drama to start the day. So that was all fun, I guess.
And it's something. We'll say it's something. Yeah, we will get into all of that. We'll get into the weirdness that was given to Bills fans to start off the day. Before we do anything, though, I want to shout out our sponsors first, starting with Greg and Aaron as they tell us more about Cover One Pass.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for that immaculate read. The exact same every single time. They are the consummate professionals. Can't ask for anything more. The chat is already popping off. Thank you all for tuning in. Just the tip of canoe, still one of my favorite names on here. I already pressed the like button, so this better be good. If you haven't pressed the like button, go hit the like button right now. It is extremely helpful for getting this out there. Share this on Twitter or X, if we're going to call it that. Share it on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. Share it with whoever you want. We love having people on here. So Spin says no QB movement yet because it's to Atlanta. Mentioned to the Raiders don't count as movement. Yeah, we'll get into all that. The wonderful Chris Kepner. Let's go. I appreciate you, Chris. Always great. Let's see. Will Lutz agreeing to the Jags on a deal, then taking it back, staying with Denver. That totally missed that. But then again, I'm not exactly all that up to date with kickers. I'll be honest, but that's kind of funny. I love the rare backing out of a deal, because that is part of what makes tampering kind of fun, right? This whole period of like, well, nothing's official yet, even though like 99% of deals go through. There's always like one every once in a while that's just like, nope, not doing it.
Yeah, I'll never forget the Anthony Barr one. That was one of my favorites. I was just thinking
about that. Anthony Barr just saying like, I was sick when I realized I was going to the Jets, and honestly, who can blame him? Eckler, 2-year, $11 million. Jeez, that's with the Commanders. That's wild. I don't get that, and we'll get into that. Jordan Poyer's driver. If you could keep us up to date on where Jordan Poyer is going to end up going after his ayahuasca retreat, let us know. If you drove him down to, where is it? Mexico is where he's at, right? Costa Rica?
Cabo or Costa Rica, one of those places, yeah.
Somewhere in Central America, he's doing a bunch of ayahuasca and opening his brain on where to go next. So God bless Jordan Poyer. RJ says, love the marathon coverage today. Thank you. That's why we're here. We're here to help you, the people, here at Cover One. Chris, wait, no, wrong. There we go. How do we like Gabe's fantasy outlook with Jacksonville? That'll be interesting. We'll talk about Gabe Davis. We will get into everything that we can. Steve Noble, I'm shocked with the $20 million guards. You're not the only one. Guards are getting paid out the wazoo, and it is wild. Before we get super deep, it's a lot of introductions. We have one last bit of business to take care of, and I promise we will get into this. But first, we're going to talk about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Folks, we know the offseason is over. We know that you're dying for content. That's why you're here. That's why you're plugged into free agency news. Let me tell you something. This news matters for your team in the future. So when you get into your home league next year and you know you don't get that one player that you really want, maybe you wanted Saquon Barkley now that he's on the Eagles, don't worry about it. Underdog Fantasy's for you. It's all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your team and all the chances to win big with none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1, that's the number 1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play when you sign up using the promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. Folks, free agency is here. Let's give it a whirl. Let's talk about it. This is fantastic. So, I don't even know where to start. I really don't. It's been all over the place. Actually, no, I do know where to start. I know where to start because it started right before free agency even opened with Dion Dawkins putting Bills fans through the emotional ringer for his own pleasure and enjoyment. And here's the thing. If I were in his position, I probably would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But come on, man. So for those who maybe came into this late and weren't plugged into this as it was unfolding to the rest of us, right before free agency started, Dion Dawkins put on his Instagram story. I'll pull it up on my phone because I screenshot it and thinking, oh, this is gonna get deleted. I want proof. He said it was good while. Next line, it lasted. Buffalo. Peace emoji. Excited for this next chapter of my football career. Wonder if it's okay to eat ranch now. So, in hindsight, we should have known that was a bit on the nose, right? Like the okay to eat ranch now was like, okay, who would say that if they were actually leaving their team that they've been with since they got drafted like 7-8 years ago, right? It's like, but you're in such an emotional state of being that you just sort of like, oh my gosh, he's leaving us. He's going to get traded or cut or whatever. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And then, of course, it was just him trolling because he got a 3-year, $60 million extension from the Bills, which, bravo to him for keeping us on the edge of our seats right as free agency opened. And not only just fans, but like, all the beat reporters, a lot of national reporters were like, looks like Dion Dawkins is going to be available. And he wasn't. So pretty wild situation. I don't know where you were at when all that happened, but I was like just leaving work when that happened and I was losing my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it and I did start to believe it, but I never really let it get to that point. I actually tweeted out maybe seconds before the extension got announced. I'm like, he is a Bill until he's not a Bill. Like, that's where I'm at with this whole thing. I'm not going to there's no world where it would have made sense to get rid of him, let alone cut him. If you're going to trade him too, like, what am I going to get as trade value for him that fits a franchise left tackle? It made no sense. And that's the thing that I guess I held on to most. And ultimately it is a 3-year extension. And now, the bookend of the Bills offensive line is going to be there through 2027, protecting Josh Allen, which is great.
Yeah, it's great. When you look at, one of the other things that happened right before free agency started was Landon Dickerson, the starting guard from the Eagles, getting a 4-year, $84 million extension, which was crazy at the time because, it's a lot of money for a guard, a very good guard, mind you, but a guard. And I think that happening right before Dawkins getting basically a $20 million APY extension for 3 years was nice. It was because I think initially you might think that's a lot of money. It's a lot, even for a good tackle. That's a lot of money. But you look at the money that some of these guards are getting.
Yeah, dude.
You start looking at Dion Dawkins all right, that's a nice bargain. Ralph Wilson Sr.'s from the grave saying Poyer's ayahuasca retreat is in the pit. Honestly, yeah, I'd buy that. Jordan Poyer's driver says, I got held up at the border. It's a long story. We're here for a long time. So if you got a story to tell, we're here for you. Dion got me. We all believed it when it happened. Quite the snow job. We'll save that. We'll put that in our back pocket for later. Yeah, it was wild. It was a very emotionally unstable time for me and for many of us Bills fans, but we got through it. And I think that's the key right now, right? Is that first 20, 30 minutes, nothing really happened, right? The first bit of news that we got was DeAndre Swift signing with the Bears, which someone's got to explain to me what the Bears are doing with their running back room. You draft Roschon Johnson last year. You bring in Deontay Foreman as a free agent last year. You had Khalil Herbert on your roster. You let David Montgomery go to the Lions. They're paying DeAndre Swift more money than what the Lions are paying David Montgomery, and I cannot begin to imagine why. That does not make any sort of sense to me because David Montgomery is a good player and was a very good player for the Lions last year. And DeAndre Swift has good moments, but get some vision, man. Learn how to hit some holes every once in a while. It's a very odd signing given the current state of their running back group and the current state of their roster as a whole, where it's you have a lot of money. Why are you spending it on another running back?
Dude, and last year they spent it on 2 off-ball linebackers and TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. That was a little weird in itself. Why would you invest so much money into a position that's kind of lost value over the years? And then this year their first signing is, let's go get a running back. I don't know here's the thing. I do know what the Bears are going to do. They're going to draft Caleb Williams. That's the whole plan here. But the fact that there's no plan outside of that is not good for Bears fans. I did have a question for you, though, because it did take a while for Tampa Day to get going, right? We got the DeAndre Swift announcement, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes after noon. It used to be at 12:01, all of a sudden these crazy deals were announced. Now it took an hour to really get going. Do you think that teams were kind of sitting back we're not going to get investigated about this, so we're just going to be hush-hush right now and wait until, an hour, and then we'll start announcing our moves?
I feel maybe the league sent out a memo hey, look, we know it's a little unlikely that some of these deals are negotiated within 60 seconds of the free agent window opening. So, if you do, we might be looking into this. So that's just speculation on my part. There's been other times where it's taken a couple of minutes, never quite 15 or 20 minutes, I don't think, at least that I can remember. So I imagine there was something said, or maybe just sort of a general agreement of hey, maybe we shouldn't do this immediately, right? That's, yeah. So that's part of it. But actually, so DeAndre Swift gets 3 years, $24 million from the Bears. Very weird. What's weirder, though, is running backs are getting paid, period. There a lot of movement in the running back market, and I think this is where we're going to start off because this is probably the biggest surprising development along with guards for me. So Josh Jacobs ends up getting 4 years, $48 million from the Packers. Now, that being said, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe I saw information that said the majority, if not all of the guaranteed money is in the first year of that contract, which makes sense, right? Like that you get the agent being able to say, hey, look at this big, $12 million a year contract for running backs. Running backs are back, right? Like they can get paid, but in reality, it's 1 year of really good money and then moving on to, maybe we'll see what happens. And knowing, like, I actually really like this pairing, right? And it's tough for the Packers that they end up getting rid of Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been there for a long time, just such a great player for them. Every year it felt like, this is the year he's going to fall off. He's getting older, blah, blah, blah. And he never really got there. He had injuries for sure, but like when he was on the field and healthy, that dude was legit and good. And I'm sure that he will continue to be legit and good wherever he ends up going. But that's tough. But it's easier to swallow we're getting rid of Aaron Jones pill when you're also taking the the Josh Jacobs shot that goes right after it. So I think that's a really good pairing, especially given how young that offense is, and especially how cheap their receiving core is. It's like, yeah, why not spend a little money for like a year or two on a really good running back in this system in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to see the full breakdown of the contract, right? Because like you said, I believe there was something along the lines like most of the guaranteed money is early on, so that gives them the out in the future if they need to get out from under it. My only problem is like $12 million for a running back in the modern NFL is just such a big number if that running back is not Christian McCaffrey, which Josh Jacobs, good player, not Christian McCaffrey, good. And also coming off a year where he averaged 3.5 yards per carry. I know he's playing for the Raiders, who didn't really have a passing game, didn't have the best offensive line in football. But at the same time, you got to kind of elevate the players around you if you're going to get paid like a top-tier player. 3.5 yards per carry, that's not really enough for me. And the game that I watched him most was when the Bills played them and held him to negative yards in the game. So $12 million a year is the thing that keeps kind of sticking out to me on this. It's like, it makes sense. It's a good player that's going to a team that's ascending, but at the same time, maybe investing yet again too much money in a position that isn't of real need.
I think that's fair, but I think it's also fair to say that this Raiders offense that he was in is nowhere close to what the Packers offense currently is. Agreed. And I think that he has a legitimate chance to like really shine in this offense in a way that's similar to how Aaron Jones has with this team for the past couple of years. So I think it's a really good, interesting signing. Weirdly, the Packers made several splashy moves, which in general they don't really do a whole lot of, especially on day one. So very, very interesting. We'll get to more Packer stuff a little bit later. We'll continue on with running backs because one of the biggest free agents coming into this offseason was Saquon Barkley. And I personally found it hard pressed to think that he was going to go anywhere outside of New York. And if he did, I thought he's going to go to a place that's just going to have a ton of cap space and just needs like talent. Like Houston seemed like a really obvious place for him. They were going to lose Devin Singletary more than likely to free agency after his 1 year deal. You have a great young quarterback in CJ Stroud, who's cost controlled. Nico Collins, really good young receiver, also cost controlled. Tank Dell, same thing. Like there's a lot of young players that are relatively cheap to the market. So why not go and grab someone like Saquon Barkley? If he could stay healthy, it will completely change the dynamic of your offense. And he will change the dynamic of someone's offense. That someone is the Philadelphia Eagles, who, if you had told me that I would live long enough to see Howie Roseman pay a running back, big money in free agency, like a running back that he did not draft, I would have said you're lying. You're out of touch with the league. You need to explore other things outside of your own organization and understand how other teams work. This is not something that Howie Roseman does. And by golly, he ended up doing it. And it's crazy. It's crazy. They have not invested so much into a single running back that wasn't LaShawn McCoy. And Bills fans know why the Eagles did it, because the Bills got to see LaShawn McCoy in all his greatness and glory in the later part of his career after he got traded by the Eagles and Chip Kelly. But like for ever since then, they have just gone like, yeah, we'll just go running back by committee. We'll get in like Darren Sproles and LeGarrette Blount and Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift and Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. And it's just like all these other players that like are fine or had a good season, but none of them were ever going to be like, yes, we're gonna give this guy 20 to 25 touches in a game. We're gonna try and focus the offense around him. Like, no, that's just not what they did. Now you have Saquon Barkley, you have Devontae Smith, you have Jalen Hurts, you have AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert. Even with the offensive line getting restructured with Jason Kelce retiring, I mean, Saquon Barkley with this offense just sounds electric, man.
Yeah.
And especially when you consider the fact that like all their other running backs left, essentially. Like Boston Scott is a free agent. DeAndre Swift was a free agent and ended up going to the Bears. Rashad Penny, who just wasn't even used last year, is a free agent. The only person that they had left on their roster was Kenneth Gainwell. So that screamed that they had a need there, but it just felt so unlikely that they were going to actually do something this dramatic about it. And the fact that they did is crazy. It's crazy to me. Before we get into your thoughts about Saquon Barkley and this move, some breaking news, not so breaking, but we're going to pretend it's breaking. Jordan Brooks, former Seattle Seahawks linebacker, has signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Miami Dolphins. Is that the first player that's come to the Dolphins in free agency? I'm trying to keep track. I know they've lost like half a dozen players, but
Anthony Walker, the Browns linebacker, also went there on a 1-year deal. It's kind of weird to me to see them hand out $10 million to Jordan Brooks, considering all the cap issues they're going to have. It's almost like they're kind of in panic mode. Like, we need a playmaker on defense. Let's pay this guy. And then they're going to have to continue pushing cap down the line. They're in big trouble as a franchise right now.
Yeah, they kind of are. Thank you to Spin0481 for putting up the comment with the exact numbers and dates, or numbers and money, so that I didn't have to just say it out loud and hope that people will remember. So interesting stuff. We'll probably dive more into linebackers and other stuff. But yeah, your thoughts on Saquon Barkley to the Eagles?
Yeah, the thing that stunned me the most is it was a stark reminder that this is a business, that the fans don't really matter at the end of the day. I know that what's his name, Tiki Barber, got into it a little bit with Saquon, and I feel like if I was a Giants fan, I would be absolutely livid right now that my best player went to my worst, most hated rival in the Philadelphia Eagles. And it kind of flashes me back to Fred Jackson when he left the Bills, nowhere near the caliber of player that Saquon Barkley is. But at the time, there were the rumors or the rumblings that the Patriots did offer him a contract, and he told the Patriots where to go, and then ended up playing for the Seahawks in the meantime. But as a player, like Saquon, this is a perfect fit to me. Like, I know the Josh Jacobs to the Packers is like fun and probably going to be a really good fit. Saquon on the Eagles, that offense should being the key word, should be unstoppable. Saquon's never played behind an offensive line like that. He's never played with a quarterback like that. He's never played with wide receivers like that. I don't think he's ever played with a tight end like he's playing with the best players at every single position that he's ever played with on the offensive side of the ball. He should catch 60, 70 passes. Like, Jalen Hurts should have the time of it. If Jalen Hurts isn't a 45 touchdown guy next year, unless Saquon steals, 15 touchdowns on the ground. If Jalen Hurts isn't a 45 touchdown guy, like I don't know what to say, because this should be the easiest year of his career with the amount of talent he has all over the place.
I agree. And even if you factor in like, oh, well, they're installing a new offense because Kellen Moore's the offensive coordinator now, and blah, blah, blah. And Jason Kelsey's retired, sure. But like Kellen Moore, like, will know what to do with this, right? Like, it's not like this is Kellen Moore's first year as a play caller. Like, he knows what to do with good players. I believe that, right? Like, and you look at the offensive line. Yes, Jason Kelsey retired. Yes, that's a big deal, and that changes things to an extent. But they knew Jason Kelsey was getting ready to retire, and that's why they drafted Cam Jurgens. And he's going to slip right into center there. You have Landon Dickerson. You still got Lane Johnson. You still got Jordan Mailata. Like, this team's ready. This team is still ready. If the worst thing you have is like a question at right guard and the rest of your offensive line is like top tier players, yeah, I think Eagles fans should feel pretty comfortable about the state of this offense from at least a personnel perspective, right? Like, they should be able to go in, especially into this division. You look at the Cowboys, who have lost a lot of players. You look at the Giants, who lost a couple of key players, but are bringing in some other players. They'll be competitive, but ultimately they still have Daniel Jones as their quarterback, and that's only going to take you so far. Washington, I don't even know what they're doing at this point. I really don't get their whole strategy, if we want to call it that right now. But man, like, it's gonna be tricky. It's gonna be tricky, and I don't really know exactly what it is there. But right now, the Eagles kind of feel like in the month of March, and a lot of things can change from now until the start of the season. We all know that. We've all gone through that. But you're going to be hard pressed, at least for me, to look at a team in that division and not at least feel pretty comfortable about the fact that the Eagles are the front runners in that division right now, despite how poorly things ended at last season for them.
I mean, they're undoubtedly the front runner. Like, I couldn't fathom picking any other team. Maybe you could say the Cowboys, but I just don't think so. Like, I don't think the Cowboys are on the level of the Eagles after what transpired with the Saquon Barkley signing today. The Giants, man, that team might be really, really bad. They did sign Devin Singletary, which is I love Devin Singletary. That's a fun signing for them. I think he'll be a good player for them. I don't think he'll be as good as Saquon, but at the same time, you had mentioned it, they were making some moves. They did kind of re-up their offensive line with a couple players, mainly John Runyon. And then I don't know if you know how to say this guy's name, Jermaine Eluemunor.
I think that's correct. Illuminor,
okay.
Illuminor, something like that.
Yeah. So to re-up the interior offensive line and then bring in Devin Singletary, who can pick up yards regardless of how bad an offensive line is. We saw that in Buffalo. Like, the Giants have a little something there, but they're so talent devoid. Like, the lack of top tier talent on that team, regardless of the trade they just made. Also, Giants are in trouble.
Yeah, I would agree with that. 2 bits of news that just came in. Ian Rappaport says the Texans are expected to sign Titans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair to a 3-year, $34 million deal, which is interesting because the Texans let Blake Cashman go to the Vikings on a big contract for like pretty similar money. And I would have, if you had told me that the Texans were going to pay a linebacker 3 years, $30+ million, I would have said, oh, so they brought Blake Cashman back. Because that was a big story for the Texans outside of just like them being a good team and CJ Stroud being amazing, was like Blake Cashman, who was with Seattle, like has turned into a legitimately good player for the Texans. Yeah. And like, this is a big reason why you should be considering DeMeco Ryans as coach of the year. And now they bring in Azeez Al-Shaair to essentially, I guess, replace him. In addition to that, the Jaguars are continuing the trend of bringing in former Bills players as they sign Ronald Darby to a 2-year, $10 million deal, which is making me wonder what year it is. Because, look, Ronald Darby has had some good good plays, good seasons in the NFL, but like, was it any time recently that would justify a 2-year, $10 million deal? I don't know, like, what that'll actually look like in terms of, like, guarantees. I can't imagine it's very much, but still, I could probably find someone else that I'm a little more interested in than that, but that's just
it's wild to me that he was drafted in 2015. Like every single time I see a player like him, I realize how old I'm starting to get, and it really kind of puts a damper on my mood. Damn, also looking at his rookie season too, he had 21 passes defended his rookie season, which is a massive number, especially for a rookie. But just never really kind of lived up to that expectations after he left Buffalo for Philly in trades that needed to happen to eventually set up the Bills getting Josh Allen. So
exactly. More breaking news from just a minute ago. Ian Rappaport says the Patriots are re-signing Michael Onwenu, who that's a big deal for them. He's getting 3-year, $57 million, $38 million guaranteed, 22.5 at signing. So good for the Patriots for getting that done, because they needed to secure players. They just need talent right now. They can't be a team that just lets talent go out the building, especially on the offensive line. And Michael Onwenu is not just a good player, but a versatile one, right? Like he can play multiple positions on that offensive line and has. So good for the Patriots for actually getting that done and not letting him hit the market and get out of there. So Tristan Parsons says that team will be garbage regardless. Yeah, they probably will. But they'll be slightly less garbage now. It'll be interesting. Steve Noble, what are we all going to do at 9:36 p.m. when the Bills announce Derrick Henry to the Bills for 2 years, $14 million? Well, you can tune into the air raid hour while they will be 30 odd minutes in, and I'm sure Steve has completely lost his voice by then. But that's what the marathon man does. That's what he does. Moving on. What other? So we went from Saquon, DeAndre. We did Josh Jacobs. We talked about
Austin Eckler.
30 years old, 2 years, $11 million. I don't know what their plan is here, man. I don't really get it.
Yeah.
Like you have Brian Robinson, right? Who is a good player, not a great player. I wouldn't want to center my running back room around Brian Robinson, so I kind of get that. But also, what's Austin Eckler going to be giving you that Brian Robinson is not? Maybe slightly better receiving skills, but even then, Austin Eckler is slow, man. You saw it last year. That dude does not have the juice, and it's sad because I really do like Austin Eckler as a player. He's been a very good player for a while, but I think his best years are behind him, and I'm not entirely sure what the commies are thinking right now with this particular move.
Yeah, and even more interesting, at least for me, is that Gus Edwards is kind of replacing him in LA with the Chargers. Yeah, and Greg Roman gets to lead that offense. So gets to play with Gus Edwards again, and then I guess Justin Herbert's just never going to throw the ball again, so that should be great for his career.
I mean, we knew that when they hired Greg Roman, so that makes sense. That tracks. Gus Edwards to the Chargers. No specifics about the contract other than it's for 2 years. It's if you're gonna replace an older running back like Eckler, Gus Edwards is just what you're getting from Gus Edwards. Just a very solid, bruising, run you up the middle type of back that can just get you touchdowns when you need them, and that's what they need. They needed somebody that they could reasonably afford that will continue to give them good production. And obviously somebody that Greg Roman is familiar with. So that all makes sense. Speaking of other running backs, Antonio Gibson got 3 years, $11 million from the New England Patriots. Again, I'm really not sure why. And I know we talked about Antonio Gibson briefly last week, and I understand that there's potential in Antonio Gibson. I've seen some of that potential in Antonio Gibson, but that potential was a long time ago, and I don't know why you're paying him $11 million now. It just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like so it's close to 3.5 a year, probably. I mean, all these numbers too, right? All the money numbers are coming probably from agents, and when we actually see the contracts, the cap hits and guarantees will all be significantly lower. But at the same time, 11 million for Antonio Gibson over in 3 years is a little odd to me. I expect that to be closer to a 2-year contract and maybe $5 million, if that. You probably go below that, and you probably should be around 2.25, 2.5. So seems like a bit of an overpay by the Patriots. But like you said, they have to just get bodies and try to find talent somewhere, because that roster is just as bad, if not worse, than the Giants are right now.
It's pretty depleted and bereft of talent. I want to say sad, but it's really not. It's actually quite joyful to me as a Bills fan to see the Patriots suffer. So yeah, it's pretty nice. Let's pivot and let's just talk about the Bills, because the Bills have not had a ton of business happening. And right as I say that, the Bills have something happen. As Dana Edson says here, and is confirmed by Field Yates of ESPN, the Bills have officially restructured Josh Allen's contract, converting much of his 2024 compensation into a signing bonus, creating $16.7 million in 2024 cap space. His cap charge in 2024 is now $30.356 million. This makes sense. I'm totally fine with that, especially since this also probably means that they're trying their best to not touch Stephon Diggs' contract.
Yeah. I don't want them to touch Stephon Diggs' contract. So I know that's a way for them to free up some cap, but with just as much as the turmoil is nonsensical, like, I don't want to push that further down the line. Like, let's just hold him where he is, see how things go this year. Maybe next year he's on the Bills, maybe the following year he's on the Bills, but why restructure that contract if you don't have to in a year where Brandon Beane's finding money in places that I didn't even think were possible, and to get the Bills to a cap compliant situation?
There's always money in the banana stand.
That's true.
A lifelong lesson to learn. RJ says that's not the full amount that they could have done for Allen, which is interesting to note. Walter says, so I guess we're not trading Allen. I guess not. It was talked about. It was thought about. I guess they won't do it. So be it, it's not going to happen. So let's see. Yeah, and a predictable move, a sensible move, totally fine with all that. That all tracks. Another interesting thing that happened right before the start of free agency was Dawson Knox getting a pay cut, essentially, in the same vein of Von Miller's sort of pay cut, where a lot of the guarantees for this year were converted into not likely to be earned incentives, which do not count for the 2024 cap if they are earned. So they get pushed into 2025 because you have to earn them through the 2024 season, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so it does free up some cap space, and it is a good sign. There was some talks, not even really rumors, just sort of discussion among the Bills fans that maybe Dawson Knox is like a trade candidate, and that never made sense to me because I couldn't imagine a team trading enough for the Bills to be like, okay, this is worth it to sort of basically need to overhaul our tight end room. Because if you get rid of Dawson Knox, that's what you have to do. Like, they bring back Quentin Morris as a exclusive rights free agent. You still have Dalton Kincaid as your first round pick from last year, but like, you needed like somebody that you could dependably rely on as a blocker, and Dawson Knox is that guy. So it makes sense, and I never really bought into the idea that Knox would be traded. So this was the right move, and it's a good move. And it's also an interesting move because that's now 2 players that have basically said, I will take less guaranteed money in order to get this team to a better place. So for those who may believe or think that there's some sort of culture problem with the Bills, suck it.
Yeah, the fact that 2 players took an outright pay cut, and they do have the ability, I'm guessing, to earn more money, right?
Right.
These payments have been moved into incentives. In theory, they have a possibility where if they hit all of their incentives, they can make more money than what they were scheduled to make. But at the same time, you're essentially saying, we're going to take this money that you were all but guaranteed to make, and we're going to give you a chance to make more, but that chance is probably unlikely. So really, it truly is a pay cut. That is a really impressive thing that I don't think happens all that often in the NFL. At least I can't remember it happening 2 times for one team in one offseason. So it's a big deal for the Bills. And again, Brandon Beane is finding money in places that I don't think many fans thought was possible. I didn't think Von Miller was going to take a pay cut. I sure as hell didn't think Dawson Knox was. And now both of them have. Who's next? Who wants to take a pay cut next?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I'll take someone. The New York Jets have signed cornerback Isaiah Oliver. Good for them, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Knowing the Jets and that particular coaching staff, they'll probably get the most that they can out of Isaiah Oliver. He'll have a very solid season for them, and they'll still be a middling team that won't make the playoffs, and Jets fans will continue to suffer, and I'll bask in their suffering. So moving on to more Bills stuff. The Bills lose a couple of free agents, as we know. Gabe Davis being the big one at the moment in terms of scheduled free agents that were lost. Gabe Davis goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 3-year contract, up to $50 million. $39 million is guaranteed, though. It was so funny when this happened because you just saw everyone with all of the takes. Just about, I think every take, this is what makes players like Gabe Davis so great, is that everyone has such a different take about Gabe Davis. And I think the one that probably makes the most sense, and I say this as somebody who's not even an NBA fan, but I believe it's JP Acosta who writes for SB Nation. He said, Gabe Davis is the NFL's J.R. Smith. And you know what? That's pretty on point. It's just like there's times where Gabe Davis just dominates everything in front of you and is the guy and will just get you everything you need in a game. And then there's times where it's just like, what in God's name just happened here with Gabe Davis? Now, in between all of that, there's still a player that is versatile, can line up in different spots, inside, outside, even inline as a sort of offset tight end, because he's a very good blocker and brings a lot in the running game from that perspective, and that's great. I think going to Jacksonville is a really good spot for him. So, it's tough to see a player like that leave. It is, but going to a place like Jacksonville is good for him. I think that Doug Peterson and that team can potentially get some good stuff out of him, but I also thought that about Calvin Ridley last year. So who knows what's going to happen with the Jags?
Yeah, so the take I saw that I agreed most with, and I actually didn't really think about it right away, is that Gabe Davis going to Jacksonville, the person that benefits the most is Travis Etienne. Like that's why Gabe Davis is almost there as that great blocking receiver that you said can play inside, outside, and open up more lanes for Travis Etienne. Obviously, there is, in theory, a benefit to Trevor Lawrence. I would say that it's probably a downgrade from Calvin Ridley, assuming Calvin Ridley isn't going to go back to Jacksonville, but you still have a solid trio of pass catchers now in Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. And then there's Zay Jones. He exists. And they also signed Devin Duvernay, but he's more of a special teams player. For Gabe Davis, I think it is the right move. First of all, it gets him closer to home, which I think is something he wanted. But it also kind of gets him that fresh start in a different offense. My only concern for him, and I've been on record for this, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is good. I don't think I'll ever think he's good until I see him be good, which he's never been in the NFL. So I wonder how that downgrade from quarterback is going to go for him. And he's still kind of in this flooded group of receivers, right? He's not the number one dude. He's probably not the number two dude. He's probably the three, maybe. I'd still think Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk are probably 1 and 2, and then it goes Gabe Davis. So I wonder how quickly Gabe can morph into a role where Trevor Lawrence trusts him and is actually feeding him the ball on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and you know, they have other guys like Kirk, like Ingram that will be able to get the ball and they'll be able to do some stuff with them. But the other thing to consider right now is Calvin Ridley is still a free agent right now. He is not signed with anyone. I kind of assumed he would be one of the first ones out of the gate, and he's still out there. And so, Walter S. here says Ridley to Davis is a downgrade. I might agree with that, but it might not matter because Ridley might end up re-signing with the Jags. Who knows? And if he does, I mean, again, I would feel pretty confident in the Jaguars as a whole. In at least in terms of, again, sort of like what we talked about with the Eagles, where it's like, okay, I feel confident personnel-wise, and feeling like they can do something with that. But unlike the Eagles, where the Eagles are kind of seemingly pulling away from the rest of that division, that AFC South is tight. It is tight. And even a team like the Titans, where they'll probably need some time to adjust to a new head coach and all that, they're still not like a terrible roster that's going to just be rolled over in every game. The Jaguars have a lot of stuff to take care of, and they've made some big moves so far in free agency. The Texans, you have CJ Stroud, you have D'Amico Ryans as your head coach, you have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, a lot of good players for them. So you feel relatively confident in them, and you have the Colts who bring back Michael Pittman. They bring back Grover Stewart. They bring back Zaire Franklin. Very classic Chris Ballard offseason for them so far. And if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, and along with Jonathan Taylor, like, that's a very competitive team in my mind, especially offensively. So it could be very, very interesting for them. Some more breaking news. This from Jordan Schultz. Noah Fant of the Seahawks will be re-signing with the Seahawks. He will be getting a 2-year contract for $21 million. Why? I'm not 100% sure, but good for him.
Yeah, and of course, part of that Russell Wilson trade that will go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history for one team. Yeah, and Noah Fant was kind of just like, I feel like he was one of the parts that maybe the Broncos didn't want to part with, but they're like, you know what, we'll throw him in there. Like, we're going to get this great quarterback. And then lo and behold, Noah Fant was probably significantly more valuable to the Seahawks than Russell Wilson was to the Broncos.
Yep. Very, very interesting time for them. As far as other players for the Bills go, Leonard Floyd ends up going to the San Francisco 49ers on a 2-year, $20 million deal. Love that for them. Love that for him. Totally earned his money last year. Totally earned another solid contract. Getting $10 million a year to be with a Super Bowl contender, it's pretty nice. So good for them for being able to get that done. It's tough. Again, you don't want to lose good players, but I think we all kind of felt like when Leonard Floyd signed last year on a 1-year deal, that was really going to be a 1-year deal, and he was going to presumably play well enough to earn enough money somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened. So the Bills also re-sign Cam Lewis to a 2-year, $4 million deal. Been on this team for a while. Good backup, defensive back, core special teams guy. Seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy signing because he fits depth at every single role, right? He can play the slot, he can play the boundary, he can play safety. So you kind of have a catch-all player that you can sit on your bench in case one of these guys goes down. And they didn't really have that slot backup after they cut Saron Neal. So now you have Cam Lewis who can sit behind Teron Johnson and do that if he needs to. Obviously, I would not be comfortable if Teron Johnson went down, consistently staying in nickel with Cam Lewis on the field. But I do like having Cam Lewis on this team. He's a solid player, despite a lot of Bills fans not liking him. And I have this theory that the only reason a lot of Bills fans do not like him is because of that one insane catch that Justin Jefferson.
Correct.
That's the only reason they don't like him. It's that one crazy wild catch that was one of the greatest catches probably of the past decade. By one of the better wide receivers of the past decade. So I'm not going to put too much stock into that. Cam Lewis, solid player.
And he played well in that game, pretty much until that point. And that was like his first start at safety too, which was, it was weird that they did that to begin with. And then it was like, oh, he actually played a pretty good game. And then that happened and blah, blah, blah. Cam Lewis is a perfectly decent player. I'm surprised that, I'm surprised that he isn't an Aaron Quinn certified guy. Yeah. It's a very average defensive back. That's right up his alley, but apparently not quite so much for him. But anyway, moving on to AJ Epinesa, who I think most of us also assumed was going to be gone, right? Like, I think we all sort of assumed he had earned enough money to kind of price himself out of the Bills market. And lo and behold, he's back with the Bills. 2 years, $20 million maximum for his contract. I love getting AJ Epinesa back. I love having another person under contract for the defensive line because it's still dicey. Let's be clear. They still need to make some moves at these positions. But getting somebody like Epinesa back who is now actually starting to round into a real role with the NFL and with this team in particular, I feel good about this signing. I'm glad that they brought him back.
Yeah, and now they have at defensive end Greg Rousseau, Kingsley Jonathan, Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, and then Cameron Klein. Let's just throw him in there too. But the first four names I mentioned, if that was their game day active roster in a couple games this season, I'm okay with that. That's fine. If those are the four defensive ends you're rolling with, I think they could still bring back like a Shaq Lawson just to kind of fill out that defensive end group. They still need a lot of work at defensive tackle, but they're fine at defensive end. They could be a lot better, but they're fine right now. And I think that's what AJ Epinesa does in 2 years for an ascending player, because he is ascending now. That I think that's a good signing by Buffalo.
I agree. And then the only other bit of news regarding Bills free agents was Mitch Morse, who got cut by the Bills, also ends up going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, good fit, has played with Doug Peterson when they were both in Kansas City. That made sense, and just sort of helps solidify their offensive line, and just helps protect Trevor Lawrence, and that's a big deal for him. So I think that was and it wasn't for like a ton of money either. It was a very, very reasonable, fair deal for them. So good for them. Moving on. Where do we? Who's somebody you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
Let's go to the guards, because the guards have been insane. We need to talk about them.
Yeah. I'll let you take this, man.
So let's just start with the name that was the big name. And when I saw the contract at first, I double checked the account because I'm like, this has to be a joke. Like, this has to be one of those accounts where head on a swivel on Tamper Day, but it was not a joke. Robert Hunt, the coming from the Dolphins guard, goes to Carolina for 5 years, $100 million. And David and I were talking before this show about this. He's a good player.
$100 million.
He's a good player, but he's not $100 million good, man. That is a insane contract to me for a player like Robert Hunt. And that $20 million seems to be like the going number now for guards, is $20 million a year, which I'll throw this out. And I thought about this earlier when we were talking about Dion Dawkins' extension. One of the most valuable contracts on the Bills right now, as compared to his peers, is probably Osiris Torrance. He's being paid pennies on the dollar to be a legitimate starting right guard in the NFL, and the Bills still have that for 3 more years. That draft pick now goes from like a oh, that's a good draft pick. He had a good rookie year. If he maintains this pace and or even improves, like that is a absolute home run of a draft pick because of the value gain you're having with that contract.
Yeah, it is wild. I was, I saw Robert Hunt goes to Carolina. I was like, okay, cool. Get him out of Miami. Love that. Super cool. And it made sense for them, right? They need to help Bryce Young, period. Right. And Robert Hunt, if nothing else, is a road grading run blocker. Like that dude is a bully and will just move people out of the way. And helping a young quarterback, one way to do that is to run the ball, right? Like that's a good way to do that. $100 million is a lot of money for Robert Hunt. I thought that, Landon Dickerson getting a 4-year, $84 million deal was a lot. And it's still basically the same money, right? Just another year added on. But holy crap. I was not prepared for a guard to get 5 years, $100 million. And I understand that he brings a bit of versatility. He can catch screen passes. He can do backflips going into the end zone and all that fun stuff. But still, I could not believe that they gave him $100 million. That was wild. And to kind of continue on, kind of dovetailing off the Panthers, they end up clearing a bunch of cap space because they just traded Brian Burns to the Giants for barely anything, a second and a fifth. When a couple of years ago they had a chance to trade him to the Niners, I think, or the Rams, one of those West Coast
the
teams.
Rams,
yeah, the Rams, for multiple first-round picks, and the Panthers said nope, we're not going to do it. We're gonna try and keep him, and we're gonna extend him, and then they don't, and they couldn't do it, and Brian Burns wanted out, and now he's out. Now he's to the Giants. I don't know if that's much better, but The Panthers, man, they're in a weird place. They're in a weird spot, and it is not great. Yeah.
I just looked up because I was interested who Robert Hunt's agent or his agency that supports him is, and it's Athletes First, who has done Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, Derwin James, so a bunch of big. They got their guy paid. Oh my God, $100 million for Robert Hunt.
Yeah, that's a way to do it, man. Seriously. Continuing on with guards. One of the cheaper guards that we brought up earlier was Jermaine Illuminor, who ended up going to the Giants, right?
Yes, the Giants. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the Giants also, so Illuminor gets 2 years, $14 million. The Giants also signed John Runyon Jr. to a 3-year, $30 million contract. John Runyon Jr. has been on the Packers for the last 4 years. This is interesting because you look at that offensive line now. If we're assuming Illuminor and Runyon are starting at guard, right? Which you paid them. I assume that's going to be the case. You have Andrew Thomas at left tackle, who's turned into a good left tackle. I think they already paid him. You have John Michael Schmitz, who they drafted last year to be their center. He'll be starting at center. And then you have Evan Neal, who right now seems to be the big question mark at right tackle. And a lot of people liked Evan Neal. I felt good about Evan Neal when he came out. So far, nothing has really happened, though. So this has potential. Right now, it looks like the offensive line is stabilized for the Giants, right? Mm-hmm. Which is good. How much of that really matters, though, when your quarterback is Daniel Jones?
Dude, yeah, I won't ever forgive Joe Shane for paying Daniel Jones. That just was such an ignorant re-signing by Joe Shane, who I thought had learned well under Brandon Beane and his time in Buffalo, and how you should treat a bridge quarterback like a Daniel Jones, like a Tyrod Taylor. Move on from them when you can and try and go find your guy. They didn't do that, and now they have to deal with Daniel Jones for another year. And in all reality, probably I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a quarterback this draft. They should, actually. Why wouldn't they draft one and then move on from Jones next year? Yeah, it's that Daniel Jones thing is going to absolutely anchor this franchise. But that update to their offensive line, it should make them somewhat competitive on offense, at least. Like, now you actually have guys that can block. Because last year, in watching some of their games, dude, that offensive line was bad.
It was not good. There were so many problems with the Giants last year, especially offensively. The offensive line was a big part of that. So bringing in guys like Illuminor and Runyon to just shore up the interior. Andrew Thomas is a good player. I feel good about John Michael Schmitz developing. We all saw him at the Senior Bowl when we were down there last year. Eric Anthony and I all thought pretty highly of him. So I like that a lot. I think there's a chance for the Giants to be competitive, even if they're not like a good team.
Yeah.
But another move that the Giants did make that I liked was bringing Devin Singletary in. And yeah, obviously somebody that has familiarity with Brian Daboll here when they were both in Buffalo. They bring Singletary in as on a 3-year contract. I believe it was like $18 million or something like that.
Yeah, you got good money, like at least $5 million a year, whatever it was. But yeah, actually good money for Devin Singletary. So good for it, and he's earned it too. He was good when he was in Buffalo, better than a lot of fans gave him credit for. And then he went to Houston and stole the job from Dameon Pierce, like that. Right. That was a surprise, at least in the fantasy community. And now he gets kind of paid by the Giants, or gets what'll probably end up being his true payday in his NFL career. And 3 years there, if he makes it all 3, good for them.
Yeah, 100%. As far as more guards go, Jonah Jackson, who was one of the starters for the Detroit Lions last year, ends up going to the Los Angeles Rams for 3 years, $51 million. And the Rams also were a big part of the big jump in guards because they also signed Kevin Dotson before free agency started to a 3-year, like $48 million extension. So they've spent about $100 million over the next 3 years on guards. And this is a team that has Steve Avila, who a lot of people like. I don't know if he's bumping down into guard or to center now or what, but like they're spending a lot of money on 2 guards. And it's funny because Kevin Dotson was somebody that came from the Steelers that nobody really thought very much of. And when he went to the Rams, it was sort of like, oh yeah, this is something that the Rams need to do. They just need to like have a body there right this year. And like, they just need to have somebody there. And it turns out Kevin Dotson ended up playing pretty well for them. And they end up giving him a nice extension because of that. But like spending this much money on guards for one team is a lot. And the Rams are kind of in a weird place just because of where they are with Stafford, right? Like Stafford at certain points kind of like last year was great. Stafford last year was legitimately great. Like it was a great renaissance of Matthew Stafford last year. But before that, it was kind of like, is he even gonna play? Like, is he gonna retire? Is his arm gonna fall off at some point? Like, there were some real legitimate concerns with Stafford and his health. He ends up playing every game and starting a playoff game for them, and was great in that playoff game as well. But you kind of just wonder, how many more years are you getting with Matthew Stafford? How many more years are you getting of legitimately good Cooper Kupp? Both of those guys are getting a lot of money. If they go, sure, it's nice to have guys like Kevin Dotson and Jonah Jackson and Steve Avila under contract, but it won't really matter if none of these other guys around them are really worth their salt because you can't afford them. Like, I get what they're doing. They're kind of trying to maximize the sort of kind of window that they have right now. But also, how long is this really going to last?
Yeah, it's weird the way that you're kind of describing it. It makes it even weirder for me. But I can see a little bit of what they're doing, right? And I think a lot of it's going to hinge on Kyron Williams and how well he played at the end of last season. And they're just going to run it down opponents' throats. They do need to plan for the future after Matthew Stafford. I don't know if he has more than just this year left in the tank. And Stetson Bennett isn't the guy. At least I don't believe Stetson Bennett's going to be the guy to replace Matthew Stafford.
And Stetson Bennett, like, nobody seems to know where he is at this point. Like, he's basically been MIA from this roster since training camp, and they've been extremely like secretive about what's actually going on with Stetson Bennett. Nobody seems to know, which is all the more confusing because this was not some like low profile. Like I understand he was a 6th round pick or whatever, 4th round or whatever, but like he was won multiple national championships for the biggest program in college. How does nobody know what's going on with Stetson Bennett right now? I don't really know. Man, this is just very weird. So moving
one last point on
ahead.
Jonah Jackson quick. Because you kind of brought it up. Like they have 3 guards. What are they going to do there? And the guy that I go to, at least on Twitter, whenever I'm wondering about offensive line is Brandon Thorne. Like Brandon Thorne is the go-to.
Yes.
If he says an offensive lineman is good, then that offensive lineman good. If he says this is probably what they're doing, then that's probably what they're doing. And Brandon Thorne seems ecstatic about this move and saying that it's going to be Jackson at guard, Avila at center, and Dotson at guard. And he said they're just going to run duo over and over and over again. You're not going to be able to stop them.
And they should. That's exactly what they should do. Like that is something I would do if I were them. Which is also easy to say when you're at home watching it on your computer or your TV or whatever.
That's a good one.
True call. Stetson Bennett is the Kate Middleton of the NFL.
Damn, that's good. Oh my god.
I was not ready for British royalty comparisons for NFL players. No. There's some discussion about JPJ being considered as a player for the Bills at pick 28. For those who are unaware, JPJ is Jackson Powers Johnson, the center from the University of Oregon, I believe, if my memory is working correctly. This is somebody who's been mocked a couple of times to them and has become a name that's like being linked by fans, at least, to the Bills at that spot. But I go back to when they cut Mitch Morse and they announced essentially that like Connor McGovern is going to be the starting center and David Edwards is going to be starting at guard. So I'd be surprised if they were actually going to draft someone that high to be their center. Like I'm not so sure about that. So sure, maybe that's a thought that happens, and maybe in the later rounds they get him, or not him, but like a player, an offensive lineman or 2 or whatever, and just let Aaron Kromer develop those guys, because that's what he's done basically his whole career, right? Like he's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Let him be one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Speaking of one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, Bill Callahan, father of current Titans head coach Brian Callahan, is now getting a new player to mold and work with in Lloyd Cushenberry. Center who played the last 4 years with the Denver Broncos is now going to the Tennessee Titans on a 4-year, $50 million deal, which is a lot of money for a center, especially one that's like been solid, good for the Broncos, but not anything special, I would say. But again, like if you're bringing in somebody that like Bill Callahan, I would assume Bill Callahan wants, because I can't imagine Brian Callahan like making a move for his offensive line and not consulting not just his offensive line coach, but his own father about whether or not this is somebody he would want. So I would imagine that this is somebody that they feel comfortable in like bringing to another level, bringing up to a higher level. But it's a lot of money for a projection, I would say.
Yeah, the one interesting thing in this whole trend of these interior offensive linemen is they're all getting paid. And just a couple years ago, it really was the tackles. That's the only people that got money. Guards and centers, no one cared about. And then there was a shift that happened in the NFL. And it's funny because every time you hear, oh, we're playing an elite quarterback, how do you beat an elite quarterback? Well, you pressure him up the middle. That's what you do. It's so easy. That's all you had to do to stop Tom Brady or stop Patrick Mahomes or stop Aaron Rodgers or stop Peyton Manning. Just pressure him up the middle. Well, teams started saying, we're going to invest in defensive tackles and we are going to pressure you up the middle.
Right.
So now you're seeing the shift back where they're saying, well, now we got to start paying guards and centers. And then you're paying running backs because you're trying to force teams to not being able to pressure up the middle by doing that. It was interesting to watch today, the big money unfold and realize we are seeing that transition in the NFL back to paying these interior guys, back to paying running backs, because the shift on the defensive side of the ball has kind of forced offensive teams' hands in changing the way that they build their roster and pay these players.
Yeah, 100%. On the topic of the Tennessee Titans, a running back we forgot to mention that also got some good money was Tony Pollard, the former Cowboys running back, got a 3-year, $24 million deal from the Tennessee Titans. Pollard is a good player, but he's definitely a role player, right? Like he's somebody that you really need to pair with somebody else. Honestly, like if the Commanders had signed Tony Pollard to go with Brian Robinson, I'd be like, oh, that's a really good pairing. That's a really good like running back group to build a young quarterback with, right? Like they have the number 2 pick. They'll take Drake May or Caleb Williams, whoever is going to be available at number 2. Like that's a good group to start with, but that's not what they did. And the Titans now go with Tony Pollard. And it's interesting because, like I just said, Tony Pollard is somebody you need to kind of build with. And they have somebody like Tajay Spears there already who does a lot of the similar things that Tony Pollard already does. But on the other hand, some of that sort of bruising stuff that you would like a running back to do to go with Tony Pollard is probably stuff you could do with Will Levis at quarterback. Because he's built that way and he's got that mentality. So, there's a way in which this could work. I don't know if that's necessarily the most ideal plan, but it's a thought. It's a thought. So.
He really does. Will Levis really does like he runs like a psychopath. The couple times I got to watch him this year, like the dude runs with no fear and just gets absolutely leveled at times and just doesn't care that he gets leveled. So he really right now is their power back, and then it's Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears that they're 2 scat backs or like the electric guys. But yeah, that's funny. Will Levis is probably their Derrick Henry this year. He's just gonna be trucking people.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. How Will Levis runs, and that's going to be a very interesting development for that team, right? Is like this was the main reason why they brought in Brian Callahan, is because they saw what he did with Joe Burrow, with Jake Browning, with like Brandon Allen in previous years, with what's his name, Ryan Finley for like a game or two. Like this is like an offensive coordinator who knows what he's doing and knows how to put together game plans for different types of quarterbacks. And Will Levis is going to require somebody to like really focus in on what Will Levis does best. And I think that Brian Callahan can do that. Some more breaking news from Ian Rappaport. The Dolphins have agreed to terms with their new center, locking in former Titans center Aaron Brewer to a 3-year deal worth $21 million. I could have a take about Aaron Brewer if I had ever seen anything about Aaron Brewer. So, I've got nothing about this. Good for them, I guess.
That whole offensive line, it almost doesn't matter because of how much their offense is predicated on Tua getting rid of the ball so quick, right? That it's just step back throw. And if he has to step back and think for more than that first read, then all of a sudden everything breaks down regardless of how good the offensive line is. So essentially, if Aaron Brewer can hold a block for a second and a half, he'll be fine. And snap the ball to Tua, he'll be fine. Like I don't really know much
that's
else.
the thing. That's the thing that I'm interested in is like they had problems at center with Connor Williams last year, just snapping the ball consistently.
Yeah.
So if Aaron Brewer can just like keep them on schedule in that way, and
Yes.
if he's a good run blocker, right? Like that matters as well, especially in that scheme where you need to be able to work in that zone scheme. You need to be able to move in step with a lot of other guys. You have Devon Achane back there. Raheem Mostert is still under contract. Is he? I can't remember.
I feel like I haven't heard of him as a free agent, so I'm going to assume he is. But he's getting up there in age.
Yeah, he's older, but like still capable. I think. Yeah, I don't think last year was just like, oh, he's going to fall off. I mean, he's still got some stuff in the tank. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. The Dolphins have made some interesting moves so far, but they've also lost a lot of players. Like they've really lost a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how they end up replacing a lot of that, because if they are going to end up paying Tua the money that they're rumored to do, good luck.
Yeah,
that's all I gotta to say about that. That's pretty much it for interior offensive line. I think we ended up hitting all the running backs. Where do you want to go?
Safeties or defensive tackles? You pick safeties or defensive tackles.
Let's go with safety for now. So the big deal that happened was Green Bay making another big splash, and they sign Giants safety Xavier McKinney to a 4-year, $68 million contract. This is a huge deal for the Packers. So the Packers were already going to lose Darnell Savage, who ended up signing with the Jaguars on a 3-year deal. Man, Xavier McKinney's a good freaking player. And when he came out, and I gotta look up exactly who else was in that class when he came out, because I remember he was kind of in competition with some other guys for like being safe, like the number one safety in that class. And I'm trying to remember.
Oh, Kyle Duggar.
Was it Duggar?
Okay,
so Duggar and Chin were also in that class. Let's see. I feel like there was some other safety in there. Duggar, Delpit. I think maybe Delpit was in there. Delpit was
Antoine
in there.
Winfield.
Antoine Winfield. Man, that was a good safety class. My gosh.
It was a good safety class.
Brandon Jones, who also signed with the Broncos. Like, man, really good safety class. Jeez. Yeah. That's kind of wild looking back at this. No wonder there's a bunch of safeties that are available right now. They all came out in the 2020 draft. That's not what I was thinking. But anyway, I remember when he came out that somebody basically said, like, Xavier McKinney played a whole bunch of different positions for Nick Saban's defense. And if you feel good about, like, Nick Saban coached defensive backs in general, why aren't you, like, all in on Xavier McKinney if he's being asked to do all these different things? And honestly, they're totally right. Because Xavier McKinney with the Giants has been fantastic. I mean, in a lot of ways, he is sort of like Jabril Peppers ended up becoming a really good player eventually. But it took time and going to a place that actually knew what to do with him before that actually happened. With Xavier McKinney, it was like, by the time he got to his second year, it was like, this was the right decision. This is one of the guys. And now he's being paid like one of the guys. And he's going to bring a ton of versatility for that Packers defense. He's going to be just a really, really good player for them, I think.
Yeah. The weird thing to me is, again, this goes back to the Giants. Like, they could have kept him. They could have franchised. Like, there was ways they could have kept him on that roster. And seeing as though he went and got paid $17 million a year from the Packers, like, he obviously deserved it, and he obviously had a market. It's kind of wild that they just let him walk out the door. I mean, they might not even get a comp because of the players that they're signing. But yeah, I mean, he's going to make the Packers better. And now all of a sudden this Packers team is becoming this kind of sneaky, scary team in the NFC, right? Like they surprised a lot of people this year, me included. I still think we should pump the brakes a little bit on Jordan Love. Actually, we should pump the brakes a lot of it because people are comparing him to Aaron Rodgers, and that is insanity to me. But he did play well last year, where I expect him to play at that level this year, maybe take a minor step back if people start catching on to his game a little bit. But like you said, that wide receiver room is so cheap that they can go and get a Josh Jacobs and improve at the running back position. They can go and improve on defense with a player like Xavier McKinney. And now all of a sudden this team has added 2 studs on 2 sides of the ball to just make them a better and more complete football team.
Yeah, it's he's going to bring a lot to that defense, especially since they're going to be transitioning to a new scheme under Jeff Hafley. Like, this is a very interesting time for the Green Bay Packers because they not only are a competitive team that are going to, I think, be a pretty consistent playoff team, but they got to fight with the Lions in order to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, for a long time, they pretty much dominated that division, not like uncontested, right? Like the Vikings had good years. The Bears, on a very rare occasion, had like a good year. But for the most part, they've owned that division. And right now, the Lions have like a really good, strong hold on the division, a really good roster, good quarterback, like a good overall core to make this work. And they won that division, made it all the way to the NFC Championship. But the Packers are also in a position to do a lot of what the Lions did last year to an extent. Assuming Jordan Love continues to make progress, assuming that offensive core continues to make progress, they find a way to replace John Runyon Jr. at right guard. You know, this is a dangerous team, and Xavier McKinney continues to make them more dangerous. Let's see here. Roy Collins says, I was hoping for Savage. You're not the only one. I know that many of us in our Cover One group chat were hoping that Darnell Savage was going to be available for the Bills, but he was clearly priced outside of their market as he went to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 3-year, $21 million deal. Jaguars are spending a lot of money. Jaguars are bringing in quite a few players onto their roster. Which is funny because 2 years ago, they brought in a huge class of free agents. And it really helped improve their roster. And then based on the money that they spent in 2022, they didn't really have a chance to do anything in 2023 in the offseason other than just bring in their draft picks and move on from there. And it showed because they had another 9-inning season, but they didn't make the playoffs and really collapsed down the stretch because of it. So now they're bringing in some guys, Mitch Morse, Gabe Davis, Darnell Savage, and all of these guys I think are really good signings for them. I think you know, Trent Baalke gets a lot of well-deserved criticism, but these are all good players that have you know, good talent and are going to be good fits for them. Their new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, made safety a priority last year when he was the defensive coordinator with the Falcons, and they signed Jesse Bates, Darnell Savage. Now with the Jaguars with Nielsen as the defensive coordinator, I think this is a good move for them. Continuing to just improve their roster, which they really couldn't do a whole lot of last year through free agency based on the money that they had spent. Now you really need to figure out what you got. Right? Like you need to figure out if this is the right coaching staff, if this is a quarterback you can commit to, if this scheme is something you can commit to, if this front office is something you can commit to. So I like that they're trying to figure out if this is all going to work together.
Yeah, and the Darnell Savage signing, right? 3 years, $21 million. It's that $7 million number, which is so much different compared to last season, where outside of Jesse Bates, essentially nobody got paid. And I think that kind of hurt one of the Bills' own and Jordan Poyer. He thought he was going to hit the market and get paid. You know, I forget who's his agent again? It's that big name guy.
Drew Rosenhaus.
Drew Rosenhaus, yeah. So he went and signed with Drew Rosenhaus, and the idea was that he was going to get paid in free agency. He didn't because the safety market was a disaster last year, and this year it really isn't. These guys are getting paid. Brandon Jones, right around that $7 million mark at 3 years, $20 million for the Broncos. Geno Stone with Cincinnati, 2 years, $15 million. That's 7.5 per year. I don't think that the Bills are in the market to pay a safety that $7 million number because they just cut Jordan Poyer and essentially saved that in that cut. I just wonder if you can get a player like Jeremy Chin or Cameron Curl at that lower note. Can they go under 5? Can they find one of those guys under 5? If they can't, they might go bargain basement shopping and then go and draft a guy like a Cam Kitchens or something like that in the draft in one of the early rounds.
Yep. Some breaking news right now from Jeremy Fowler. The Patriots have signed a quarterback, and it is Jacoby Brissett. It makes perfect sense. I actually said this right before free agency started, that this was somebody that could really end up going to the Patriots. He was drafted by the Patriots originally. Has bounced around to a couple different teams, has started for multiple teams, had a really good season in Cleveland 2 years ago when they were waiting for the nasty man to come off of suspension. So this seems like the right move, whether or not they get a quarterback this year in the draft, they sit at number 3, presumably Drake May and Caleb Williams go 1 and 2, whoever goes 1 and 2. Maybe they take Jaden Daniels at 3. I don't know. If they do, learning under Jacoby Brissett is a pretty good way to bring a quarterback along, right? And I think that, this is a good signing for them. And they needed somebody that could just run the show, right? Like somebody that's not Bailey Zappi, essentially. It's very interesting. So
I like that signing. Yeah, I like that signing a lot. And you brought up Jaden Daniel. To me, they have to take a quarterback at 3. I guess they could trade down and hope they can pick up some talented players and maybe next year go after the quarterback. But that seems like a plan that's not going to work if you just keep delaying the inevitable thing that you need to do, which is draft a quarterback. But you're right, Jacoby Brissett, what better player to learn behind? We don't have to throw you into the fire. We can throw this guy into the fire that we know has been rather successful in the NFL for what quality of player he is. But yeah, that's a good quarterback signing. I mean, there was a couple other quarterback signings today too.
There definitely were. There definitely were. And actually, an interesting connection with Brissett is not just that he goes back to New England, but also to Alex Van Pelt, who is his offensive coordinator in Cleveland. So there's familiarity there. So that's a good thing for them. Kimmy Poo? That's a weird name. Kimmy Poo 2915. Hey, hosts. We have names. They're on the screen. We should get running back Jones and wide receiver Parker. I am not interested in Devontae Parker at all. I don't know what he's going to cost, but it's probably going to be too much. Aaron Jones. That's interesting to me. It would depend on what exactly he would want money-wise, right? Because he's going to end up getting a good amount of money because the Packers owe him a certain amount of money for having to cut him with the guarantees that he had left on his contract. I feel like that would be a good pairing with James Cook. I don't know if that's a route the Bills would go to, but it's interesting to me at least.
Yeah, the Austin Eckler 2 years, 11.5, right? So you're talking about 5 3/4 there. That's probably the Aaron Jones number, and I don't know if that's a number Buffalo can stomach at this point, right? That $5 million for RB2 is a big number. I really think it's going to be Ty Johnson and some other guy at that $1.7 million number that Brandon Beane seems to love for whatever reason.
Exactly. So more breaking news at the top. The Seahawks are closing in on re-signing Leonard Williams to a contract. They traded for Leonard Williams at the middle of the season this past year. Was a good player for them, even with the Seahawks defense kind of breaking down as the season went on. He still played well for them. He's older, yes, but oh my gosh. Ooh, no, now I'm not. Oh my gosh. Okay. Leonard Williams is getting a 3-year deal averaging $21.5 million per year.
No.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for Leonard Williams. Oh boy. Yikes.
But that kind of like shifting away from the safety talk, right? And the safety market's been pretty good this year. The defensive tackle market has exploded as well. And Leonard Williams getting that kind of money, that's a little bit much. And he's not even the highest paid defensive tackle of this cycle.
Yeah, that's man, that's a little crazy to me. No, let's use that. Let's use that as a way to talk about defensive line right now. So one of the big names that got signed, and I'm a little surprised at where he actually ended up. Christian Wilkins ends up going to the Las Vegas Raiders for buco dollars. Big money. Like, holy crap, that's a lot of money for Christian Wilkins. I think he's earned that, but oh boy. 4 years, $110 million. I believe $81 million of that is guaranteed.
It's a massive
which
number.
Is
yeah, I'm not sure.
A lot of money. But holy crap, I'm so glad the Bills don't have to play Christian Wilkins anymore in the division. That is something I'm very glad for. And let's be honest, the Raiders are not going to be a good team. They're just not.
Yeah.
But Christian Wilkins fits the vibe of the Raiders so exquisitely, so perfectly. Putting him and Max Crosby on the same team while they go and try to tee off against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert is pure vibes. And that's all the Raiders need to be right now. And on the topic of the Raiders and vibes, they also signed Gardner Minshew, which, like, come on. That's perfect. Come on. That's great. Roy Collins. Wilkins likes slow hanging fruit. Very true. Underscore Aiden underscore. Shocker when the mainstream media finally calls out Wilkins for diddling Mo.
They will. And it's gonna happen.
They probably will. Oh, yeah. I can't wait. It's gonna the Swifties are gonna like that's gonna be a day. It's gonna be a day on that hell site of Twitter when that happens.
They'll go to Congress. They'll demand legal changes to the rules of the NFL. Yeah, man.
Oh man, weird time, man. All right, yeah, Christian Wilkins to the Raiders. Like, it's a good move for them, and I like the Raiders. The Raiders defense was kind of the main reason why they played well down the stretch. Patrick Graham is a really good defensive coordinator. I think he's done a good job both with them and when he was with the Giants as well. This is somebody that like could potentially end up sort of vaulting himself onto head coaching lists. I think getting somebody like Christian Wilkins with Max Crosby, with some of the other players that they have, like this could be a spicy defense. Maybe not the best defense, but a spicy defense.
Dude, Max Crosby's had no help and plays every single snap and has full speed every single time with literally no help. And I have not once ever seen him complain, ever see him call out that he has no help. He just goes and does his job and works harder than essentially anyone in the NFL.
Yeah.
And now you're putting Christian. Yeah. You're putting Christian Wilkins next to him.
Yeah. He plays more snaps than basically any other defensive end in the NFL. He's not really in a rotation at all, Max Crosby. And it's wild that there's a player that can do that at such a high level. It's really crazy. So good for Max Crosby for actually getting some help.
I'll also say I think that this is great news for the Bills too. One, because you're taking an elite player like Christian Wilkins out of the AFC East. Obviously, that's good news. But you're putting him in the division where the bad man lives, in Patrick Mahomes, and he's going to make his life hell. 2 times a year, Patrick Mahomes has to go up against Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby. And with the way that the Raiders are talking this offseason, their goal when they play the Chiefs is to piss the living whatever off out of Patrick Mahomes. And they're going to get after him. They're going to hit him. They might be a little dirty. I know Christian Wilkins likes to be dirty in multiple different ways. that's fine. Let Patrick Mahomes deal with it. Like, Josh doesn't need to deal with it anymore, at least not twice a year.
Exactly. Jacoby Brissett, 1 year, $8 million. Easy. Good for the Patriots. Good for them.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to, man, where to go? Let's talk about Jonathan Grenard. So Jonathan Grenard was somebody that was in Seattle for a bit, went to the Houston Texans, has slowly developed over the years, and has now gotten the proverbial and literal bag. 4 years, $76 million for the Minnesota Vikings for Jonathan Grenard. Big signing for them. I really like this signing for them. They are, between this and Blake Cashman and Andrew Van Ginkel, they are really overhauling this defense, which did not have a ton of talent last year. And Brian Flores was really making chicken salad out of chicken shit with them last year. And I think that bringing in somebody like Jonathan Grenard he's going to continue to develop. Having somebody like Andrew Van Ginkel opposite of him, who, like, Andrew Van Ginkel's not great. He's just a very solid, smart, technically refined player who does what he's supposed to be doing. And having somebody paired like that with Grenard, I think is really, really good. You still have Harrison Phillips there. You bring in Blake Cashman. You still have, I think they still have Harrison Smith under contract, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think they have to have him under contract, yeah.
Yeah, at this point. And there's good players and good coaching on that side of the ball for Minnesota. Now, what do they do on offense? Who knows? Maybe this is a J.J. McCarthy team, and they'll live to regret that for the rest of their lives. But, it is what it is. For now, like, Jonathan Grenard getting this much money for what he's done is a really it's just a great story for him, right? Like, to have somebody who genuinely developed, who took his time developing. Like, this is exactly what you want for players in the NFL. It's just like, he was a 3rd-round pick from Louisville, started at Louisville, ended up going to Florida, but was a 3rd-round pick, and just took his time and developed and actually turned into a legitimate player. So this is how it should be in the NFL. It shouldn't be so much like, oh, here you go. Here you get thrown into the fire, and if you don't produce right away, you're not good, and we're just gonna get rid of you. It's like, no, like, let's do something to try and bring these guys along a little bit better. Speaking of more edge guys, just in from Ian Rappaport, the 49ers are signing former Panthers defensive end Yetur Gross-Matos to a 2-year deal worth $18 million. I know this is somebody that some Bills fans were interested in. Now he's going to the 49ers. So that's 2 Bills interested players now, with Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos, that the Niners have snatched up.
You know what's interesting about that is Chase Young, who they traded a 3rd-round pick for, they brought him in. I believe he's a free agent now, and they just said, "Nah, we're good. We know we traded that pick for you, so we did invest in you. We saw what you are, and we don't want nothing to do with it. We're going to go sign 30-year-old Leonard Floyd." And that's a really massive indictment on Chase Young, to a point where, like, I don't want anything to do with the Chase Young business as a Bills fan. Like, I don't want him on the Bills. I don't want him anywhere near us, because I just don't think, I watched the effort not be there when he was on the 49ers. There was multiple plays that became like viral sensations of him just not playing football. He just would stop and be like, I'm good. I'm done playing. So it's just interesting to see how the 49ers have approached this and said, yeah, this guy, we literally wasted a 3rd-round pick on. Don't bring him back.
Yeah, it's tough for them. So, moving on to, let's see, who else has been out there at the defensive line. The Arizona Cardinals have signed 2 guys on the defensive line. Bilal Nichols, who was with the Raiders last year, he gets 3 years, $21 million. And Justin Jones also gets 3 years, $30 million. Coming into last year, the biggest hole probably in the NFL was the Cardinals defensive line, because they just had nobody there that was worthwhile. And now they have some guys. Whether or not these are like game changer type of guys, I don't know about that. But they're guys that are. It kind of reminds me of when the Bengals were taken over by the Zach Taylor regime, and after that first year, they didn't have any linebackers. They had no like legitimately NFL caliber linebackers. And then in the draft, they end up getting 3 different guys, including Jermaine Pratt, or maybe Jermaine Pratt was already there. I can't quite remember the exact order, but they got Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither, and I think Jermaine Pratt. I'm still not 100% sure. But yeah, it was what they needed to do, and they have yielded the results of that, right? Like Jermaine Pratt's been good for them. Logan Wilson's been very good for them. Like they just needed to bring guys in to help them. And I think that's exactly what the Cardinals have done here with these 2 signings in particular. So good for them. I think this is a pair of really solid signings without breaking the bank for them.
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals are just this really odd team to me. I don't know how competitive they can be, and I just don't see. I don't know what the plan is for the future with them. Right? It looks like Kyler Murray is going to be their guy at least for the foreseeable future, which he should be because that contract is also a disaster. But Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, bring in 2 decent players to play defensive tackle for you. But the thing that must be frustrating for Cardinals fans is I don't think that they expect to compete. They're not competing right now. And they already have their quote unquote franchise quarterback, and they're not competing for anything. That would be kind of really hard to stomach. But one player I did want to quickly bring up, because I know that you have some interest in this, is Bryce Huff.
Yes.
3 years, 51. So my thing with Bryce Huff, he was good when he was on the field for the Jets. Not just good. He was great when he was on the field for the Jets.
Correct.
But he just didn't play a lot. He's never played 500 snaps in a single season. So 3 years, $51 million is just such a massive number for him, but it does seem to signify that Josh Sweat is going to get moved. At some point, Josh Sweat's going to get traded, or do you think that they brought in Bryce Huff saying, okay, we're going to bring Bryce Huff and we'll keep Josh Sweat on this roster?
So this is interesting, right? Like Howie Roseman has always prioritized offensive and defensive line. That's all that, like looking at the Eagles and his time there, just right now, you see that, right? Like, you see how much they've put into the offensive and defensive line, which is what you want, right? Like, those are premium positions. You want to be able to invest in those and then all that. I was surprised when they said that Josh Sweat was on the trade block. I also haven't really heard any movement in regards to that either. So I wonder if that was more agent generated to try and get Josh Sweat out of there because of the change in defensive scheme from Vic Fangio. Maybe this is a Vic Fangio thing and they feel like he's not a fit with Vic Fangio. I'm not really sure. I think at the end of the day, like they got to move either Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick. I don't think they'll move both, but I think Reddick probably brings a little bit more to this Vic Fangio scheme than Josh Sweat does. Not that I think Josh Sweat can't. But I do think that bringing in somebody like Bryce Huff is first of all, just a classic Howie Roseman signing. Just somebody that like hits all the metrics, hits all the like advanced projections, right? Of like, this is somebody you got to get now because he can be a star. At least that's what the projection sort of is. But the other side of that is, like you said, he has not played a lot of snaps in a single season in the NFL. And I think that's okay when you go to a team like the Eagles because they will have some sort of rotation. Remember, it's a team that prioritizes rotation. They still have Nolan Smith, who admittedly didn't do much as a rookie, but he was one of their first round picks last year. They still have Jordan Davis. They still have Jalen Carter. Brandon Graham is coming back for his last season with Philadelphia Eagles, which, by the way, shout out to the Eagles for finding players that just stay with them. Like Jason Kelce was drafted in 2011 and stayed with that team 2011 and stayed with that team until 2023. Fletcher Cox was drafted in 2012 and stayed with that team until 2023. Brandon Graham is about to enter his 15th season, all with the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's wild.
Stuff like this doesn't happen in the NFL. Like, it's just not something that really happens in the NFL, especially with the different regime changes that they've gone through, right? Like Andy Reid, Chip Kelly, Doug Peterson, now Nick Sirianni. Like, it's kind of rare for players to just stay all the way through all these different changes. But, you know, when you have one guy that's a sort of bloodline through the entire way, which is Howie Roseman, of course, the owner, Jeffrey Lurie, has a very close relationship with Howie Roseman. You know, I guess it makes sense in that way, but still, it's pretty crazy that that's actually happened for them. So just a fun little thing with the Eagles there. Moving on, we're kind of running out of time because the air raid hour is going to be rearing and ready to go at 9 o'clock. We're going to go rapid fire. I'll let you go with somebody. Who do you want to talk about real quick?
Just Kirk Cousins. Like, the Falcons, they're gonna win the AFC South. Like, there would be no way they don't win.
It would
the
be
AFC
cool
South.
if they. Okay, yeah, NFC South.
Or NFC South. I'm sorry. NFC South. Yeah, Kirk Cousins, I'm interested to see how he comes back from that Achilles tear. But I think with his style of play, he'll be fine. The rehab seems to be going well. I mean, he was dancing, like a month ago at the NFL Honors. That's a quarterback now where all of a sudden you can look at like Kyle Pitts and be like, maybe Kyle Pitts, that unicorn that was drafted that everyone said might be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe we can kind of unlock Kyle Pitts now. So we'll see there. Kirk Cousins. I mean, that's a big number though. 4 years, 180 at Kirk's current age. But what is Atlanta going to do? They had no other real option.
Yeah. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. It's all right there in front of them for the Falcons. They just gotta get this together, man. You can't have this much talent being paid this little money and not do anything with it. You can't. It can't be like this. You gotta do something with this. So good for assuming that Kirk Cousins actually works out for them. I think this is going to be a really solid way for him to end his career. I think Zach Robinson is potentially a really good offensive coordinator, somebody that's very well thought of in the league. You know, I've gushed enough about Raheem Morris on this podcast that I think this Falcons team will pretty much run away with this division at this point. Yeah. I'm going to talk about a trade, and that is Detroit getting a corner in Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Detroit gets Carlton Davis and a 6th-round pick from Tampa. Tampa gets a 3rd-round pick. This is a really good pairing. Carlton Davis is a man-to-man press coverage, in-your-face cornerback. And for the amount of press coverage man coverage that the Lions play, this is exactly the type of signing and move that the Lions needed to make. And Carlton Davis has been in the NFL for a while. He's only 27 years old, which is good. Good for him. This is somebody that they can get a good couple years out of. And given the current window that the Lions are in right now, this was a good signing.
Yeah, and they didn't give up much to get him, right? Yeah, you switch that 3rd for that 6th. That's fine, especially to get a starting corner, which I think Detroit needed, and that kind of showed in the playoffs. I'm going to hop over to one guy, Devin Duvernay, which is a player that I've actually always been interested in. Arguably one of the best returners ever, which I don't think people give him enough credit for that. If you look at his return stats in comparison to some of the other greats, Devin Duvernay's up there. 2 years, 8.5 though, that 4.2 a year for a player who's really just a return specialist. That's a little pricey in a league that doesn't really want to allow returns anymore. So interesting move by the Jacksonville Jaguars, but a player that kind of makes them better all around, something I guess they're trying to do this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Is there anyone else that sticks out to me? Frankie Louvu to the Washington Commanders. Louvu was somebody that was kind of a darling for a lot of NFL media people that kind of dug into sort of hidden gems. He's somebody that played well for the Panthers defense. He gets 3 years and $36 million for the Washington Commanders. Makes sense. He's kind of this hybrid, positionless type of player, and Dan Quinn's defense is a positionless type of defense. On that same note, Dorrance Armstrong gets 3 years, $45 million to rejoin his former defensive coordinator from Dallas to Washington. These are pretty typical standard moves that are made for a team that hires a coach, right? Like this is what I kind of expected for the Dan Quinn led Commanders to do. So
for sure. I got one last guy that I just wanted to bring up real quick, and that's a name that I don't think a lot of people have heard of, which kind of makes sense. Colby Parkinson, tight end. He was on the Seahawks. Signs with the Rams. Fine. 3 years, $22.5 million. That's $7 million a year. This is a guy who's never had more than 350 receiving yards in a year. His career total in 4 seasons is 618 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. I have no idea but then again, Sean McVay can make, gold out of wine. I don't even know how to describe what Sean McVay can do with people. So maybe he sees something in this guy, and then at the end of this year, we'll be saying he's the next, Travis Kelce. I don't know.
Well, so here's the thing. So, Colby Parkinson is a blocking tight end.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money to give to a blocking tight end, but I kind of get it. If you want to run a bunch of 12 personnel, that's fine. But they kind of already have a blocking tight end in Tyler Higbee, who they paid a pretty solid contract to. I don't really understand these two moves together unless they're going to just be this really run-heavy team. And maybe they will be. I don't know. But it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money being spent on 2 tight ends whose best assets are really just to block. That's a lot. One thing that I kind of want to discuss to close this out is we have not really seen much movement in the wide receiver market. Gabe Davis got a bunch of money. That's kind of been it. Devin Duvernay, like you said, got some money. Gabe Davis. Outside of that, this wide receiver market is pretty cold. Calvin Ridley hasn't gotten any sort of movement. Tyler Boyd hasn't gotten any movement. There's guys out there that are probably going to continue to hang out there because this wide receiver draft class is deep and it's elite. And I think the league is recognizing, I don't know if we really need to pay a lot of these dudes, especially at Calvin Ridley, if we can just draft someone else that, doesn't have a gambling problem.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'll say my theory all along with signing a wide receiver, I don't understand that fully because I trust Khalil Shakir, I trust Stephon Diggs. So who's my wide receiver 3 going to be? If I'm going to sign somebody, he has to be an upgrade over Gabe Davis. There is not players on the market right now that I'm confident is an upgrade over Gabe Davis. Going into the draft, at least I know I have a lotto ticket chance at getting a guy that might be an upgrade over Gabe Davis. So why invest the capital and lose a possible comp pick paying for a wide receiver that really isn't going to make this offense significantly better? You can probably get a guy for under $2 million and not really affect the comp picks at all. That's who the Bills should kind of go after. But other than that, it's draft a wide receiver time for Buffalo.
Yeah. John Calvin, who, for those that don't know, is a very famous Christian reformer. Surprised he's alive 400 years later, but we have Ralph Wilson Sr. coming to us from the grave very often on this show, so that makes sense. John Calvin says, not as deep as 2020, no way. I assume this is in regards to wide receiver draft class talk. Yes, I would say it's probably as deep as that class, if not potentially deeper. This is a crazy group, especially at the top. Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., all of them are going to be, I feel pretty confident in saying, are going to be elite level wide receivers, or at least potentially elite level wide receivers. So I think that's a big thing. TP Catini, I'm going to say that. That sounds fun. TP Catini says, trade for Sutton or Deontay, please and thanks. I am totally into both of those. I'm going to assume that Cortland Sutton is relatively cheap. if Jerry Judy's going for, what was it, a 6th round pick or whatever it was? I don't even remember at this point. It really wasn't much.
5th and 6th, I think, something like that. Yeah.
If Jerry Judy's going for a 5th and a 6th, Cortland Sutton's got to be cheaper than that, I would imagine. And given the amount of day 3 picks that the Bills currently have, I'm into exploring that. Deontay Johnson is a really good receiver. Like, I understand some people have issues with effort or drops or whatever. This is somebody that I think with a change of scenery could really just kind of reinvigorate himself, and his style of play fits really well with how Josh Allen plays. So I'm definitely into that. Diana Rossini is tweeting now the Texans are re-signing wide receiver Noah Brown, so he is now off the market. I know that's somebody that some people were interested in. Former Chiefs punter Tommy Townsend is signing a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Houston Texans. So he is no longer with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm trying to see if there's any last second moves. I think that's going to be it. I think we gotta end here.
Yeah.
Fortunately.
And when we sign off, just know a Bills move will be made, because that's the tradition of this show.
Within 30 minutes of us signing off, the Bills will have done something. Brandon Bean after dark is a very common thing. So just be ready for that, and be ready for this podcast to be outdated in less than an hour. So it's unfortunate, but that's part of the game. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is absolutely unequivocally one of the biggest shows that I think the show has ever had. Across our 3 platforms, we have over 1,000 viewers, 266 on YouTube, and over 1,000 on Twitter. So thank you so much for watching. It is so appreciated. We love every single one of you. Oh boy. How much time we got? All right. Spin wants true or rubbish. I'm going to come up with something real quick.
Yeah.
Let's do it. We got 1,000 people here. Let's do it. Folks, it is that time. We're going to do it real quick. It is
true or rubbish.
Let's go. All right. True or rubbish. Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot here. What are we going to do? Okay. True or rubbish. Calvin Ridley will sign a deal that is longer than 1 single year.
Oh, that's a good one. Dude, no, rubbish. I'm going rubbish.
Rubbish. All after all. It was all rubbish.
1 year deal for Ridley then.
Yeah, I think he wants a prove it deal so he can go and get paid next season, because right now there's just not enough receivers.
I think that's fair. We're split here. Dana says true. Lynn says true. Aiden says true. Aiden says rubbish. Spin says rubbish. Jordan Porter's driver says true. Aiden says Calvin Ridley's deal will be worse than Gabe's, to be honest. Wow. All right. Interesting. He's saying Ridley $8 million for 1 year. That would be interesting. That'd be quite a steal for whoever gets him. Yeah. If that's the case. What do we got? We got like 3 minutes. All right. True or rubbish. The Bills will re-sign Daquan Jones.
I think it's true.
This was true.
Oh,
all after all. Can't believe it. It was true.
It's true. You're going to say true.
Yeah. The market for a 30-plus-year-old defensive tackle, I think he can make more money in Buffalo. And by more money, I'm thinking around that $3 million number. Buffalo brings him back, doesn't affect the 2 comp picks that they currently would have if they nothing else happened to this entire cycle. Daquan Jones re-signs with Buffalo.
The chat is 100% in agreement with you. Spin says that better be true. Dana says true. The market is slimming and he was a great fit for us. William on YT. I don't think so because of his age. All right, let's do this. I think that's going to be it for us. We are truly, genuinely out of time. So thank you all so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. We're so glad to be able to do this. Glad to be doing this in front of this many people. If you like the show, hit the like button. Seriously, hit the like button. Share this video with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. It is a great help for all of us to just get this out there. It's a great time in the off season. We really love doing this. The sort of thing that we really appreciate and love doing. It really is one of my favorite times of the year because of all the chaos that happens and all the different stuff that we get to talk about and analyze. It's a lot of fun. You're gonna get it even more as the week goes on with the other guys. You're gonna get it in just another minute or so with the Air Raid Hour. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. I'm sure I'll be tweeting out nonsense the rest of this week.
You can also find me tweeting out nonsense at DFAUXY on Twitter. You can, which we're going to have a grand old time. And in about 20 minutes or so, I'm sure the Bills will be doing something. Thank you all for joining us. Again, hit like, subscribe to us. There are tons of shows throughout the week on Air Raid Hour, Under Review, Disguise Coverage, Cover One flagship show, Film Room, Buffalo Late Night, Draft show on the Cover One College Football channel, which is a separate channel, Cover One Fantasy channel with Chris Chews. Marlon has his Cover One College Football show over on the Cover One College Football channel. If the Walls could talk, that's going to be it for us. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you all next week.